around 30 people migrate to major Indian cities. This, of course, creates a challenge to be sustainable and to manage the migration. So an important focus for this discussion is how to develop smart cities, smart and sustainable cities. And what do we mean by smart? And all of this at the same time as being economically, ecologically, and socially sustainable. So I'd like to welcome actually 5 panelists on stage, and I'm not sure if they got their headsets on, but please join me on stage, Mr. Sarbajit Deb, Mr. Stefan Paulskog, Mr. Akash Passey, Miss Annelie Stiglund, and Mr. Guido Daniels. And please excuse my pronunciation of your names, but Shona Attica, you're the Director of Communication at Scania in India. And Mr. Akash Passey, you are the Vice President of Volvo Group. Yeah. And Sarbajit Deb, you're the Nordic CEO of LTI. Yeah, the former L&T Infotech. And Miss Annelie Stiglund, you're the Deputy Director of Teknikföretagen. And Guido Daniels, you're the Senior Vice President of Network Control at ABB.
Yes.
Great. So let's talk about cities and smart cities, and we're going to kick this off with Sarbajit Deb. Yeah. Stage is yours, please.
Good morning, friends. A warm welcome to the start of this session, and we thank India Unlimited for organizing this. This year is a very special year because it's also 70 years of India's independence, and wishing all the best to the organizers for India Unlimited. So on smart cities and how it has impact on citizens, there is a presentation. Is that going to be up today or? Okay. So a bit on myself. I'm Sarbajit. I'm responsible for the IT business of Larsen & Toubro, which we rebranded as LTI, which is the IT company. And I'm based here in the Nordic, and we work with customers in the manufacturing sector as well as the finance sector in the Nordic region. I will take you through, so one of our group companies' initiatives has been in smart cities and how L&T is working in the ecosystem of smart cities in India. L&T is short for Larsen & Toubro, two Scandinavian engineers who went to India in the 1930s. So we have a legacy from Scandinavia, and that is still very strong today in terms of values of the company, and that gets reflected in whatever we do with stakeholders with whom we engage, be it with our employees, with our ecosystem of suppliers, and also with our customers. What you see here, we will be celebrating 80 years as an organization which is not owned by any one single individual. We are owned by the financial institutions and the shareholders in India and globally. We're listed in the stock exchange. That's the parent company, in short known as L&T. So we are, as some say, builders to India. So we build power plants, we build roads, we build bridges, we build the airports, the Mumbai airport, the Delhi airport, the Bangalore airport, the Hyderabad airport is all built by L&T. This is something most people see on the background. You don't see the power plants, but that's also built by us. We don't run them. That's run by other companies who are professionals in that field. So what you see here, we were also proud to be part of the Mars mission. Some of the casings of that Mars mission was done by L&T. We are also we are the only company from India in that nuclear fusion initiative which is going on in France at this moment. So one company from each country is represented in that initiative. What you also see is the infrastructure projects, which I will come to in the next slide. And we are working with Swedish companies. We have worked with some of the Swedish companies who are now working in India as independent entities, and also working with L&T in some of our projects. In the smart city area, I think there is technology, but there is an ecosystem. And Indian smart cities are refitting of existing cities which are overpopulated, cities which have grown from 500,000 to 20 million. So has the infrastructure, has the planning grown? No. I think we hear the word agile quite often here nowadays in terms of software development. In India, every one of our interactions is agile, be it decisions. So I think some of you who have gone to India, you see how decisions get taken, how we quickly change decisions, and that is nothing else but agile in the way of working. So at the same time, we need to have a bigger vision or a long-term vision how the cities would be for future. And that is where the smart city initiatives came from the government. From independent entities have been formed in each state. So you have the central government, and then you have the state governments coming up with their individual initiatives. We are proud and also lucky to be participating in 4 of the major smart city initiatives. One is in Pune, one is in Nagpur. We recently also were awarded for Vizag, which I will talk about. And then, of course, in Mumbai, which is retrofitting of some of the existing infrastructure, which we are doing. So one of the biggest initiatives in Mumbai is the security systems, the cameras, which gives the authorities, a chance to plan crowd movements, to improve traffic management. And but in India, the growth is so much. By the time you manage something, you have to plan growth. As Alan mentioned, also in mobile, this is also happening in the physical world, be it in cars and infrastructure. So some of the components here you see are components which get into a smart city. Now, L&T is an integrator. We don't manufacture all these components. So that is where there is a tremendous opportunity for Swedish companies who are world-renowned in manufacturing these products to work with L&T and other companies like L&T to bring this to the Indian citizens in terms of technology. The other aspects is citizens' participation. So we have listed out different areas which are components in the smart city. The tenders are being rolled out from different government institutions, and Swedish different agencies are participating in this area. Yeah.
I think we have to come back to that in the discussion.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I think the last slide on this, just to give you a snapshot of what are the different components which go into a smart city, as well as a sustainable city of the future. Thank you.
great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. So, Chona Attica, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I represent Scania today. Scania needs no introduction, but I guess I do. My name is Attica Chona. I'm a partner at a consulting company called 6 Year Plan, and I work in Scania since the last 4 years as their director for communication. And I was hired in as responsible to actually build a sustainability agenda for Scania in India. And that has been actually the core offer in the market. And just taking that starting point, Scania has put themselves in the center of driving the shift towards sustainable transport systems. We don't see ourselves as bus and truck manufacturers anymore. We see ourselves as a company that will build a sustainable ecosystem for the transport industry, not just in the markets we exist, but in the world as a whole. Last year, this shift was strengthened by a conference in Paris, where we had the United Nations represented, and we had a lot of industry represented that will actually collaborate with us to help build this shift, because it will take multiple stakeholders, not just from industry, not just Scania, but it will also take government, it will take states, it will take bodies, it will take a commitment from the general public as well to really help to drive a shift, which is actually not just India, I think it's globally required today. Transport is one of the biggest factors that is causing both air pollution as well as congestion in cities. And that's one of the big impacts that we can have. Could we take the next slide? Thanks. Our CEO, Henrik Henriksson, he took in leadership about a little over a year back, and with a full hand, he's shown that direction. As he says, we believe that we redefine the role of transport. That's our aim, and we will take the leadership in creating this shift. In line with that, Scania has also set up two separate identities that support this shift, and one of them works with logistic solutions, not just the hardware, but also the software to help countries and cities to build systems and not just to build the ecosystem. And we also have another wing called Scania Sustainable City Solutions, which is also then helping cities to see how the solution in the market can actually become both efficient, reduce the impact of congestion, and reduce air pollution. Taking that to the Indian subcontinent, sorry. So sustainability at Scania is not just one-fold. We see that we have a task of doing things right, but also doing the right things. And we see that energy efficiency, alternate fuels, and smart and safe transport is something that we can have an impact on. And that's when we make our strategies, both markets, from the markets as well as from a global aspect. Those are the core offers that we ensure are part of every strategy. When it comes to doing responsible business and doing things right in those strategies, every activity should cover aspects that make sure that resource and energy efficiency is part of the operations, diversity and inclusion, health and safety, human and labor rights, business ethics and community engagement. They are all part and parcel of how we deploy our strategies, our business strategies, and our strategy to actually drive the shift towards sustainable transport. Bringing that down to the India level, we have a famous project in India, in Nagpur, where Scania ambition to actually show best-in-class pilot project, where our ambition from the very start was to produce the fuel, because biofuels, which actually is not even present in India since 2 years back, we decided that we will build a renewable fuel solution for the city of Nagpur, where we run the buses, we own the buses, we operate, we maintain, we fuel the buses, we have the whole fueling infrastructure ourselves, and we make sure that the city gets a solution that actually both can be measured in reduction of pollution, and then also we're transforming waste to fuel when we are doing this. So it actually, the exchequer is happier because we are reducing the import of fossil fuel. We're reducing the impact of fossil fuel by actually having a local fuel that reduces air pollution by almost 90%, NOx by 80%, and particulates by 70%, which are the big hazards today. And India is really battling with that in all cities today. We also then see that we're giving in a premium, safe solution when it comes to the transport and the mobility. What has also happened during the process of this project is we have also realized that in a lot of cities, how the routing for the buses is also something that actually could be smarter. And that is also one thing that we are talking to our customers, which are the municipal corporations and the state today, to support them, not just to support the whole ecosystem. And it's a real learning case because as you go on, you realize how much can be done and how much needs to be done to actually, it's not just about running buses on renewable fuels, it's also running buses that actually make people's lives in the city better.
Attica, I think we have to come back to that in the discussion.
Yeah,
maybe.
I just have the last slide, which I don't need to say anything about. It's self-explanatory. Thank you so much.
Great,
Thank
thanks.
you for your time.
Thanks a lot for that. Akash, Passey, floor is yours. Let's hear your view from Volvo.
Thank you, Ulf. Short words. I represent Volvo Group here. As others have said, it needs no introduction. Well, just to start with, and I'll focus more on cities rather than talking about Volvo. I would just say in the beginning that Volvo Group is fairly well spread in India. We've been there now for 20 years. We have over 12,000 plus people working and growing at a high rate with the manpower requirements there for Volvo Group. We focused on trucks, we focused on buses, we focused on commercial vehicles, we focused on industrial and marine engines in India, in addition to other services on technology, IT services, financing, and so on and so forth. The group turnover is out of India $2 billion. That has been a substantial growth. We also have a large successful joint venture in India, where we are the third largest commercial vehicle producer in India, in addition to Tata and Leyland, who've been around for 70 years there. With this kind of a footprint, we are able to serve people in the lower part of the value chain, as well as in the additional or the premium part of the value chain. In short, what have we been able to achieve to contribute in India over 20 years? I think we have brought in a big change in the way the life of the driver in India is impacted. So a driver today, compared to 20 years back, is trained in training schools for all products, be it Volvo, Tata, Leyland, or other manufacturers. A driver has good quality and high respect in the society, which was not the case. And this was made possible by Volvo being the first one to put up a driver training school, training about 60,000 drivers over this journey. The other change is made in terms of transporting people from one place to another. First of all, about 10, 15 years back in long distance travel through Volvo, all across the country, from one place to another, in a true bus, which is in the premium segment. And today, a ticket for a bus sells in the name of Volvo for the premium segment and not as an air-conditioned or as a premium bus. So that brought cities closer and brought people closer. The third contribution was very much in the cities, where it's been traditionally over 70 years, products based with very high floor, built on truck chassis, not really built for people to travel from one place to another within the city. And that is where Volvo brought in 12 years back low floor city buses, which are now spread over 33 cities in India, which means that all the other key manufacturers, including the local ones, have moved on to bring in better technology for people, therefore providing better quality of service for people moving from one city to another. Then Volvo has made a big difference in long distance travel, especially in the 100-ton plus heavy tonnage products, which are moved from one part of this 4,500 kilometers long country to another in less than half the time what the local competitors can do. Volvo has made a big difference to the construction equipment industry, where mining used to take place in many parts of India only for 8 to 9 months, because rest of the months it was rainy season and the products could not perform. Volvo brought in products 15 years back today, which work more or less 22 to 23 hours a day, 365 days, or rather 360 plus days a year, which has led to higher productivity, higher mining skills, and higher earnings for our customers and their success. Lastly, India is a large country, still kind of on the way, but struggling with providing the right kind of power systems all across the country, and that is where the industrial engines have played a big role, especially in large factories, in supporting power supplies through gensets, where power is not available 24 hours in different parts of the country. So with this footprint now, we move into the topic of the day, my city, and that is where we feel that with our good footprint across the world, but especially in India, we will contribute quite a lot. So we do know that in India, there are 100 smart cities coming in. A large number of cities are already current cities which are being developed, And then there are cities which are new and will come up for the first time in India. And you could say the ratio is about 50-50. And I think that those of you who are aware, it is said that by 2060, 50% of the new cities in the world, or 50% of the cities in the world by 2060 will actually be new cities which don't exist today, which means that the whole gamut of the city business will change. And in India, this is primarily of importance because we know that 2/3 of the Indian manpower, which is 1.3 billion, that's one thing we're good with China. We're going to beat them soon on the population front. So we will be the highest in the world. It has its own challenges, but it has its advantages. With that, we see that with 1.3 billion people in the world, with cities moving to the, with people moving from villages to the city, what kind and what role can we play in sustainable transport in different scopes and mesh it well with technology, which is the next gamut coming in the future, to provide the right quality of life, safety, and many other features to the Indian population. This slide says a lot. That's the challenge in India today, congested roads with growing two-wheeler and four-wheeler population, and this is where we would like to see it. Many parts of the world already are very focused on this approach of a sustainable transport, and that's what we are driving. Lastly, then a couple of minutes, and I guess that I don't need to go into this because we'll talk more about it during the panel discussion.
We actually have to stop there, Akash.
Yeah. So these are some of the key enablers, and I look forward to that discussion later.
Yeah,
Thank
sure.
you.
Thanks. Okay, thanks a lot. Let's have our next speaker, Annelie. Please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for having me here today. Before I joined Teknikföretagen this spring, I used to work at the Ministry of Defense, and in that capacity we did have a lot of talks with our Indian counterparts, and I had the opportunity to visit India a few times, so I feel really happy to be part of the celebrations this week. Obviously, we're here to talk about city development today. And that is something that's driven by the emerging of technologies and trends, but I think it's also important to remember what the growing urbanization is doing to our societies as a whole. We need to not only build sustainable cities, but also to build sustainable societies. I think that last year's election in the US was an important reminder of what this development is doing to our societies as a whole. And I find it very interesting that people who live in cities, whether it's Tokyo or Berlin or New Delhi, tend to feel more connected to people in other cities rather than perhaps the rural areas of their home countries. So I think that's a very important perspective to keep with us in these discussions. So at Teknikföretagen, we currently have 3 main priorities apart from labor law, which is obviously our main missions. The 3 priorities are sustainability, the supply of skills, and trade affairs. We and our members are very keen to work with partners to deploy urban city solutions, whether it's clean tech, energy efficiency, or renewable energy. And we are very eager to contribute to the India Smart City mission. Therefore, we have signed an MOU with our Indian counterparts, CII. We did that last year, and I think that all of you are familiar with CII. They are a large trade organization in India, and they do have an amazing network. Our mission is to work closely with CII to connect actors on the Swedish and on the Indian side. And in order to do this, we have made an effort to compile Swedish technology, know-how, and stakeholders from both the private and the public sectors. And we have created what we call and the Smart City Platform. The idea behind this, it sounds big to say consortium, but that's what it says in my talking notes, so I will say consortium, is to leverage Sweden's smart city competence in a very structured manner, and to help identify and create sector clusters in order to develop supply chain solutions for India's smart city program. I think that one of Sweden's strengths is our experience when it comes to overall city planning and our ability to combine both our cutting-edge technology with the integration and synergies between different sectors based on an inclusive governance. So that is obviously something that we are happy to help promote. And just to give you an example of the activities that we do, we will facilitate a workshop now in October with a fellow panelist, L&T, where they, based on their expertise as the system integrator, will have the opportunity to meet up with many small and medium-sized companies, not only from our members here in Sweden, but also from the Nordic and the Baltic countries, in order to find good connections. I think that all of us who sit here can mention many technology solutions that impact on city life, and we have already heard quite a few here from my fellow panelists. There are so many exciting things out there, ranging from parking apps and mobile payments to the way we have seen technology revolutionize our healthcare system. It's amazing things going on there. And to me, it's very important that we focus not only on the environmental aspects, but also on the social and the economic side. In Sweden, the environmental awareness is really high, but at the end of the day, I mean, we need to use our technology solutions to enable a better way of life, basically, for our citizens, and both when it comes to clean air and good waste management, but also for the education system, innovative retirement homes, and to have like a sound and a financially viable public administration as well. So to me, a smart city is basically a desirable city to live in, based on all aspects of life, whether it be gender equality, lower CO2 emissions, or more efficient resource management. And that is something that's like base of what we do and our mission here. And I think I will stop there.
Yeah, that's right. I feel like I'm the bad guy on stage.
No
but I
worries,
have to
thank
interrupt
you.
everybody, but, thanks a lot. So the last in the panel, but not at all the least. Guido.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you. My name is Guido Daniels. I'm in ABB here in Västerås, located and in Sweden. And I'm in charge of the network control part, which is, let's say, looking how the electrical infrastructure of a country works and influencing it online so that it keeps working for ABB, and also responsible for Asia in this. So this is, you can go to the next slide. When you look into smart cities, and then you of course have a few things which are very important. First of all, when you're in a city and the population is very dense, so you need less space. This is one example of this. What ABB does is that we build very compact switching stations to switch the electrical energy. You see a picture here of it. And that also means using the new technologies we have, and we also develop and make in India, is that we can reduce a lot of the copper wiring in those stations, have a simpler instructions, and have save the space. I think that's one of the main issues when you look about smart cities. You can go to the next slide. There are another thing for smart cities, if you look in it. I know I have Volvo and Scania here, but when you look into electrical transportation, that's without CO2 emissions. So you have a real improvement of your CO2 footprint in the cities, which is a quite smart solution. And now with the new technologies we have, we can load the electrical buses only at the places where they stop anyway. So you don't need big catenary systems, which you used to build in the past, and which were very expensive and could have many faults because it's just lines outside. This requires also a lot of software, because we have to look at the system, how it's loading, how it's working. It's a lot of data, and all those data have to be gathered in a central situation where we then look at it, process them, and give commands to the bus system again. So that's all about what we do at ABB, also is a network control. Can I have the next slide, please? And that's my last slide, and that's the main thing when you look into smart cities and smart situations. The main issues in countries like India is that you have an infrastructure which is sometimes old, but it's so fast growing that the infrastructure is not big enough to cope with the task you have of supplying reliable and clean energy. Yeah? And that's our main task we take. So we say, how can we make utmost usage of your infrastructure which you have? It's far easier to build smart systems on the existing structure than to build new lines and new power stations. That takes more time. You will do it anyway, because you have to do it, but also let's make most use of it. And how do we do this? First of all, we collect all the data from the networks, then we put big analyzers into it, and then we have actions. And why do we do this? We do this because the infrastructure is so complex that a normal human being can't just look at it and do it. So you need the support of advanced computer systems to work in and to make utmost use of your infrastructure. And that's a thing which reduces congestions in the network, which reduces outages of your electricity supply, and makes industry work in countries like India and other countries in the area. We do a lot of work in India, we do a lot of work with India, and we have to see in this that India is a continent on its own. It's not just a bridge to Asia or to further east, because India has an advantage. It's not that far away from here. It's only 3-4 hours time difference. It's not 9 hours. Yeah? So if you don't think you can work in India and do work in Australia, that's the same as doing it from Sweden. Have India work as a continent on its own, and that's what we do, and then you will succeed there. Thank you.
Great.
That's my contribution.
Thank you, Guido. So I think this panel, consisting of 5 people with different perspectives, is like kind of a good illustration to this discussing of smart cities. Because smart cities is like, it's very complex. There's a lot of things going on, a lot of things to consider. And so I was just like thinking, and I'm just going to throw this question out to you, and you can go for it. How do you start? How do you, when you think about smart cities, how do you where do I start?
How do you make people's lives better in a city?
Yeah. So that's like the main frame.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then you have like transport, you have energy, you have housing, you have like, so which one is the most important? You say, of course, transport, but...
I mean, transport is an integral part.
Yeah.
Life is changing, business models are changing. I mean, nobody could have thought 10 years back that Volvo and ABB, 2 large Swedish companies, will work together to give transport solutions out around the world and in India together, let's say for electric buses.
Yeah.
To bring in zero emission, to give better quality of life, to give last mile connectivity for people to move from one place to another.
Yeah.
And that is not easy in India, having had experiences now living in both sides of the world. That the challenge outside of smart city is that a normal city has 50 agencies to deal with. which means that even if you have one objective of a sustainable city, it's 50 different stakeholders to talk with. But smart city will change that, because there will probably be less stakeholders to talk with, and there would be more collaboration between parties.
So you're going to have smart cities, going to have smart corporations as well.
I think so.
Yeah.
That's what it is heading for.
Yeah. So what are you, Annelie? What are you saying?
I think it's the same thing as everywhere, basically. I mean, you need to find the people and the companies and the representatives who actually want to do something, because all areas are obviously important. So you need to find like the right go-to people and the ones who actually wants to drive this development. And obviously in the work that we try to do, and at first we look at you look at India and 100 smart cities, and it's just like so huge. I mean, there's no possibility at all for us and for our member companies to take on something like that from that perspective. I mean, many of our small and medium-sized companies, it's difficult to make it into the markets in the Baltics, for instance.
Yeah.
So I think that you need to take it like piece by piece and sort of like find the people and the actors who actually wants to accomplish something and just try to sort that out.
Yeah.
Rather to the ones who are actually just doing the talking, and to see also where the finances and where the resources are.
Right. Arika, what are you saying?
So I think one of the things that we have seen that has a huge impact also is to actually take a problem and convert it into a solution. Because the cities are really, for example, we have taken waste and converted it into fuel, which is actually not just solving a mobility solution, but it's also solving an inherent problem of the city, which is that, waste is piling up everywhere. And it's also then driving employment. It's driving the fact that you're making wealth out of something that was just lying around. And that has been a problem for the cities. So I think the solutions that are coming in are not just not just optimizing what was existing, but it's also taking real grassroots problems and solving it. And I think the government is playing a very good role in that, because they are kind of managing this ecosystem in a smart way. So they look at solutions where it's not just single, it's plural, and and of course creating employment is one of the biggest agendas as well. We're a growing population with a demographic dividend that it needs to be addressed. So I think what the smart cities is doing is not just optimizing, but it's also creating a new ecosystem that is going to be, relevant for the next 25, 30 years, while the country is growing in population as well as economics.
So how many smart cities are there out there in India or today that you sort of label as smart cities?
So there were 20 that actually won the smart city kind of competition as it went out. But I don't think that, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's a model that is spoken about. Yeah. But I think it's also an example of how technologies and how other cities are addressing the opportunity. So I don't think we should limit ourselves just to the smart cities that have kind of got the government's grant to become smart. I think it's a culture that is developing. And I think I would say actually a lot of cities that are not smart are doing a lot more than the ones that have the smart city label to them, if I'm right.
Right.
So I think it's not limiting. I think it's a new way of approaching development.
Sarbajit, what is your view on this?
I think people's aspirations in India have changed in the last 30 years, apart from the young population which has come in. So people's aspiration, how they deal with government, how they deal with agencies, that has changed. Today, internet, the mobility has brought in, you do not need to visit a government office, and in the process use the public transport, which is cranking, and with the new transportation solutions offered by Volvo, Scania, and others, we are able to address this. But a lot of governments is coming in, be it for tax filing, be it for submission of registration. This, along with how do you collect data before you arrive at a city, that is also coming in from smart cities initiatives. How do schools, where do you have the schools, how much time people take to go to schools, where do you get an admission? which schools you get admission, people decide where to stay, the way towers are being built around the country. L&T today has over 300 towers being built somewhere in India, at this moment. So there are huge infrastructure projects going on, which needs funding, but which also needs planning, and then the entire ecosystem of people living around that. So these are challenges, but by addressing all this together, with what you also mentioned, is the way we will move forward to address people's aspirations. Because if that is not addressed, then these will be, white elephants in future.
Yeah. So Guido, I was thinking like ABB, you have like you have a lot of things going on, and you work with smart cities from different perspectives.
Yeah.
So how do you prioritize what you're doing, and what's the most important thing to do when you sort of want to construct a smart city?
Well, first of all, we look, of course, at the reliability of the supply in such cities. I think that's the main thing, that you give access to energy for all people, and on a reliable manner. So if they just have electricity for 1 hour a day, you don't have to think about a smart city. So first solve this. And then, of course, you have to look at the environmental aspects. So what's your carbon dioxide footprint of your supply? Where are you going to put power plants? How are you going to work, let's say, with maybe some small generation plants, which also can produce cooling for the environment or for buildings, and generate energy there. So combine those solutions, be smart, have some renewables in your network where it's feasible and where it's let's say economically, where you can do it economically, and build this all together and coordinate it. And I think this coordination part, that's a very high level thinking and doing, and you need a lot of also IT infrastructure to have this working, and that's then the last step to do.
Yeah. Because I was thinking, like, I have one last question for you guys in the panel, that you were talking about, Annelie, that this is like, are we just talking about big companies here when you want to find Indian and Swedish solutions? Are they like the smaller companies doesn't have anything to do with this because it's like too far away and it's too big?
No, I think the smaller companies, the NGOs have a very big role to play in this ecosystem, because there is no one company who is offering a solution, or a group of big companies and the government. So there is a big role to play from the NGOs in terms of educating the citizens, educating government officials, how do you deal with, how do you use this infrastructure. That is also part of it. Otherwise we have today, unfortunately, also in India, very fast cars, big roads, roads which can be driven at, where you can drive at 200 kilometers an hour, but if you do not have the drivers trained, you will have more accidents. So all that is part of the ecosystem in different technologies.
All right. So, what are you saying, guys, in the corner?
Yeah, I think that, of course, collaborations are happening. Akash mentioned that they work with ABB, we work with L&T, so there are a lot of collaborations. And I also think that one of the big things when you bring in a new technology to the market is also to then develop it locally, to localize it. And there's a whole Make in India wing. And to be able to localize it, the best case scenario would be to have our suppliers that are in other parts of the world to actually come and set up infrastructure in India to also produce for us, because that kind of fast tracks. So I think I think the larger companies are also enablers for letting the smaller companies to come in and develop in the market. I think that's one platform that could actually be looked at. Yeah. And it's not just the manufacturing of the automobile, it's also the manufacturing of biogas, it's the manufacturing of ethanol, it's bringing in, helping to develop the ecosystem in the mobility solution as an example. Yeah. So I think it's...
I'd just like to say that India is a very large country. When you talk of 100 smart cities, it does look big. But if you look at the number of cities, towns and villages in India, it's probably a few thousand. So I look at it as a good task by the Indian government to build an island of excellence. So if you can show in different parts of the country smart cities which are quite functional, which improve the quality of life for people, make movement easy, make schooling, make work easy. I guess that is what we will achieve with these 100 smart cities, and then it will follow on. We've seen that example, in a way, followed in some other large countries around the world. But India is a large country, so there is space for small, there's space for big. We sit here because we represent large companies, but actually it's a lot of small companies involved out there. We are not as large companies, as agile, as flexible as is the need to move with the speed with which the Indian government wants to move with smart cities. And that's where I think smaller companies do a better job. So it will be a good mix of both of them.
All right. Annelie, you get the closing remarks on this.
No, I agree with my fellow colleagues up here. I think many small companies do have amazing solutions, but it's obviously time-consuming, and it does take a lot of resources to establish yourself on a market so far away. And I think that we need to, they need to work with larger companies to be able to do that in many cases, I think. And financing is obviously a big issue also for small companies.
All right. Thanks a lot. We could talk a lot more about this, but we don't really have the time for that. I'm sorry. But thanks a lot for your participating in this discussion. Give them an applause. All right, we're going to go from country. Oh, thanks a lot.